Hi everyone, my name is William OHanlon. You probably know who I am if you're already at the website. And today is November 11th. Happy Veterans Day, everyone. I wanted to talk a little bit about what Veterans Day meant to me and the OHanlon family. So it was a big deal. We had everyone in my family. First of all, thank you. If you served your country, thank you very much. It's a big deal, and you should get a lot of respect for that. I respect anybody who serves their country, no matter what branch that they're in. I happen to be in the Navy. My older brother was in the Marine Corps. My father was in the Army, and he served during the German occupation, so he was a VFW. And we just come from a whole line of veterans. Everyone in my family serves their country. It's funny, my great uncle, his name was Uncle Rennie. He has a picture of when he served in the early 1900s. And he was in, I don't know what they call them, but they were the balloons. They were like blimps. And he said they would raise them up like hundreds of feet in the blimp. This was like an actual company in the military, in the Army. And they would look over enemy lines and map out where the enemy was and stuff like that. And then he said, and then if there was a plane coming, because those balloons were so easily shot down, he said, I was like, what do you do if a plane comes? He said, you look down and you go, get me down as fast as you can. So that's how far back I recollect my family. My father was in the infantry, and he served during the Korean War. He wasn't drafted, though. He was a volunteer. And he was actually in Bamberg, Germany, for the German occupation after World War II. So he said Bamberg was a city that wasn't bombed. And so he had a great time over there, he said. He's the only one I know that puts on in the infantry. They run like 10 miles a day. And he put on 10 pounds over there. He loved the German food. He loved the German beer. And he put on weight actually in the infantry. And then my brother was a drill instructor in the Marine Corps. And he served, I think, just right around the Vietnam period. And that was a big deal. So he was training. He was... what should I say? He had a very good career in the Marine Corps. He advanced rapidly. And he was a drill instructor in San Diego. He went to Parris Island, but he was a drill instructor in San Diego. And my father went to Fort Dix. And I was in Orlando. I don't know if you remember, but Orlando in the Navy had a base, a naval base, in the 80s, and it was a huge naval base. And that's where I went to boot camp, and then I went to my schooling afterwards. They call it A school, and I was a signalman. So I had to learn Morse code and learn the flags, semaphore, and learn how the flags go up on the ship and everything. And I was assigned to the USS Astocia, and that was an FFG with guided missiles. And I have one of the I saved all my Navy uniforms. I still have my Navy dress whites and dress blues. And this is an official hat here of the USS Astocia from the Navy. And you can still order more, though, but they are official hats. And so this was exactly the ship I was on, FFG-15, fast frigate with guided missiles. And in 2003, I think the ship was considered obsolete, and it was sold to Turkey. I think Turkey owns the ship now, but it's still out there running around. And I had a great time in the Navy. I went into the Navy to help pay for college. So I had 2 years at Camden County College when I went into the Navy, and I went into what's called the Sea and Mariner program. It was a SAM program. And you went to, what it did was for people who wanted help for college. Because my father went to college 12 years at night on the GI Bill from the Army. And I did 2 years at Camden County College, and then I wanted to go on to a university, and I went into the SAM program, which helped pay for that. So I went into boot camp, and then after boot camp, I did a couple of months of schooling. I was active duty for about 6 months, and then after that, I was released to the reserves, and I was stationed out of the Philadelphia Navy Yard, which is where the USS Astoria was. So I was assigned to that ship, and then I did 1 weekend a month, and then 2 weeks in the summer. And I was in there for 5 years active, 2 years inactive. I was honorably discharged, but I have a funny story to tell you. What happened was, I served during Desert Storm, and one drill weekend, our reserve weekend, no matter where my ship was, the Navy used to fly us to where the ship was. So if it was in Norfolk, Virginia, we showed up Friday night, and we'd take a bus or a plane, and the Navy had us until Monday, 6 a.m. for our reserve weekends. So it was an exhausting weekend because they always put the reservist on all the odd, the tough jobs, the jobs nobody wanted, and all the night watches. So we never got any sleep that weekend, but that was okay. And so I'm on the USS Astoria. I'm doing 1 weekend a month. I did 2 weeks in the summer, and I loved it. We went to St. Croix. When I was there, I was like, this is fantastic. So I got to see the world a little bit as a reservist. And so then at the end of one drill weekend, and remember, I'm serving during Desert Storm, what happened was they brought us down to the mess deck before they let us go on a Sunday night or Monday morning. And the mess deck in the Navy is the cafeteria. That's where you go sit, of course. But it was empty, so we sat down, and they passed out our wills and everything. They had us fill out our wills, and like, for example, they went over, if you lost a pinky, it was worth $2,000, but if you lost your hand from the wrist down, it was worth $5,000. And they just went over everything as far as losing limbs and how much it was worth. And I'm like, what's going on here? Why are we filling out like our last will and testaments? So as it turned out, at the end of that, they said, come on your next drill weekend as if you're not going home. So we knew we're going to be activated for Desert Storm. We're going to go over and relieve some of the other Perry-class ships that were over there, some destroyers, and give them a break. And that was it. So I'm being activated. I'm going into a war zone. So before I left, years ago, I used to play for the VFW softball team with my friends. If you remember, there was an old VFW on the Black Horse Pike as you entered Washington Township. And so they threw me a going away party because back then you had Vietnam veterans that were still alive, and they understood what I was going through because everyone at that time was like, yeah, let's go over there and kick some ass. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm the only one going. Everybody else here is going to work tomorrow. And so, but you have to go. Even though I enlisted just to get, money for college, if you get activated, if a war breaks out, you have to go. And that's what happened. So even though I was afraid, I had to have the courage to go anyway, because you have to go. You have to serve your country. And I did such that. Now, I don't know, I'm going to give you a little bit of history, but a few years before that, in the early 80s, there was a ship called the USS Stark, and that was in the Persian Gulf. And if you remember, the USS Stark got hit by an Exocet missile, and I think it was from Iran. And it didn't sink the ship, but it severely damaged the ship, and it killed like 30 people, and it did a lot of damage. And what happened was on a fast frigate with guided missiles, at the front of the ship you have what's called a phalanx gun. And the phalanx gun is your last line of defense against missiles. and it just shoots out. It goes this way, it goes that way. It was Aegis phalanx gun. So that's what you rely on if you're getting shot. And the USS Stark, their phalanx gun wasn't working. So what happened was a missile got through and hit the ship. A lot of sailors died, and it was a really tough time. It was a really tough time for the Navy, and it was because the phalanx gun wasn't working, and that's why the missile hit the ship. So on my ship with USS Astosian, remember they said, come back next week, next drill weekend, as if you're not going home. Bring everything with you. So I did just that, and I brought everything with me, and they had a going away party for me at the VFW, and it was a lot of fun. And I was going off to war, and I knew it. Prior to going to war on a U.S. ship, you have to go down to Guantanamo Bay off of Cuba. You have to go down there, and they train, and they make sure all the battle systems are functioning correctly. And guess what happened? The phalanx gun wasn't working on my ship. And after what happened to the USS Stark, they said, we're not going over. And they said, if anybody here wants to go on another ship, I think the USS Perry was also there, a destroyer, that you could volunteer to do that. And I went ahead and volunteered, but by the time the war went so fast, that war was done in 6 months. It was over. It was done and we were already 3 months in when my ship was being activated to go over there. So they didn't need us to go. The war ended. We kicked their asses in 6 months, and it was over. But what happened is after having that going away party and then going to my ship, and I'm thinking I'm going away and I'm not coming home, and then I find out when I get to the ship that the phalanx gun's not working and we're not going over to the Gulf, I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And they said, no, at the end of the drill weekend, you're just going to go home. And I'm like, I can't go home. Everybody throw a going away party for me. I'll be disgraced. And I went home, and I went home on a Sunday night, Monday morning, and I was living with my parents, and I remember my father going, oh my God, did you go AWOL? Because that's what they say in the Army. And I was like, no. And he's like, what's going on, Dad? And I was like, Dad, the phalanx gun wasn't working. And I'm not so sure he believed me until the next day. I think he I wimped out, but I would never do that. But yeah, it was a big deal. And then when I showed up at the VFW the following week, and they're like, what are you doing here? We threw a big party for you. And they gave me gifts and stuff, and they were like, we want our gifts back. And I was like, look, it's not my fault. And so that's a funny story about me being a veteran and what's going on. And another thing is that because my father was in the Army-Navy game was always a big deal in the OHanlon house every year. And when I was younger, it used to be played at Veterans Stadium. And if you remember before that, it was played at every year, I think it was JFK. Yeah, it was JFK. If you guys remember JFK Stadium in Philadelphia before Veterans Stadium, that's where it was. And I think now they play at Lincoln Financial Field. But for years, my father and I, this was a big Saturday for us. And the Army-Navy game, and I wore my Navy stuff, and he wore his Army stuff. And it was just a big deal for us. And I remember Army for like 3 or 4 years in a row, kicked Navy's butt. They kicked our butt, and my father used to laugh at me. But that was a really big deal in the OHanlon family. So that's my. I just want to wish everybody a happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your service. We could not have a free country without people serving in the military. And sometimes I wish I had stayed and did a whole 20 years because I really loved being in the Navy. I just loved being out to sea on a ship. It was a lot of fun, and I had great memories of it. So happy Veterans Day, everybody, from the OHanlon family. Thank you.